It's so wonderful to have Reverend James Lawson with us today as our keynote speaker. When we planned this again, what a prescient moment to have Jim Lawson here. He was one of our founders, and he came along ICUJP, and he helped shape us into an organization that would stop blessing war and violence. And he talked about and has taught us his nonviolent methodology. So today, in an era where we have a lot of things for which we are ready to become violent from all the issues that we have been facing in this country, it's a good reminder to be able to have Jim Lawson with us to help us think through how best do we respond. Reverend James Lawson began working alongside Dr. Martin Luther King in 1957. Dr. King really compelled him to move to the South and join the emerging struggle for justice and dignity. In fact, Reverend Lawson had been in India studying Gandhi's methods of nonviolence and brought it back to be able to teach America that there was another way. On the eve of his assassination, Dr. King called Jim Lawson the leading theorist and strategist of nonviolence in the world. Jim Lawson led his first nonviolent action campaign in Nashville, which were a series of lunch counter sit-ins that successfully challenged segregation. His workshops in nonviolence philosophy and strategy influenced young activists who later organized freedom rides and other path-breaking campaigns. We're lucky in Los Angeles because he moved out here and served at Holman United Methodist Church as a pastor for 24 years. And to this day, continues teaching nonviolence, organizing workers, youth, and immigrant communities. Jim, we love you, and we're so grateful that you are here with us today. Please speak to us about what we need to do in this day and age.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. I appreciate the opportunity to be with ICUJP on this important occasion and at this critical time. And I want to express my appreciation for not only the invitation, but for the privilege of seeing friends again, even though only through Zoom, without the flesh and blood of being person to person. You must know I do not like Zoom, though I've had to learn to teach on Zoom this year, finishing up the last class at UCLA just this past week. Zoom allows me to speak to myself, which greatly handicaps the whole business in my mind. Anyway, let's begin. I want to point out just a handful of impressions and reflections. First of all, in 1915, Albert Einstein presented to the world as a very young man what today the scientists call the Einstein equations. There were several equations that helped scientists to explore the issues of force and time and space and gravity and a whole range of items, so that Einstein is today called the father of physics, though he did not invent physics. And scientific explosions in many different fields in the 20th century became the reality. Among other things, those equations allowed the human race to lift up the power to commit suicide. as no generation of human beings have ever had. Nuclear energy and explosions and bombs and the rest of it. Around 1906-07, in South Africa, Mohandas Gandhi coined the term nonviolence. He coined it as a translation, he writes, as a translation of the ancient Jainist Hindu word Ahimsa. I won't go much further into that, but this is in Gandhi's own writings. He coined it because his anger at meeting the racism of the Boer and British Empire in South Africa alarmed him to no end. But he decided that in that anger, he could not fight that racism or that empire system out of anger or out of the methodologies of the empires. And so he fell back on his childhood experience of Ahimsa and determined that he must fight that racism and its concomitant pieces in South Africa in a fashion that would allow the conquest of the racism. And so was birthed his 50-year experiment with nonviolence. Now, nonviolence, as Gandhi continued to conceive of it, was not just a science for social change. Gandhi, in fact, insisted that nonviolence represented a change of paradigm for the whole world, for the human race, and especially for Western civilization. On the one side, if Western civilization could not learn the ways of nonviolence, it would lead to the destruction of the planet and to the destruction of the human family. In various ways, one finds that in the literature that Gandhi himself wrote. So I want us to understand nonviolence is not just about a science of social, political, personal transformation. It is a pitch to us that a paradigm has arrived. There is no way through endless war. There is no way through the present systems of hurt and pain in the world, except through the paradigmatic change that we move from injustice to justice, from violence to nonviolence, from hatred and brokenness to compassion and truth. A strong feature with my thinking over the last 30 years is that in the 20th century, there must be a series of major campaigns in the United States that we can call nonviolent campaigns. Because I think the key to the paradigm is in our country. Our country represents the ingathering of the worst features of Western civilization, as well as some of the best, but the worst. And those worst features are in operation in large number. I'm excited by the fact that I'm watching perhaps the first national campaign of nonviolence in the United States. Catalytic agent being the death of George Floyd, which we saw again and again on television, acted out by the police, with George Floyd in handcuffs on his face and a boot across his neck. We could see in that 8.46 minutes, um, 8 minutes 46 seconds, his execution. And while that is still a hard video to see, it has become a symbol of the torture and the brokenness and of the violence that racism and sexism and violence and plantation capitalism has imposed upon great, great, great numbers of people in the United States. I am impressed by the presence of white marchers. Now, of course, white marchers dominated the peace movement in the 60s, young people and students especially. But in the nonviolent movement of America, using the language of Congressman John Lewis, that was primarily a black freedom movement with very few white people walking with us or going to jail with us or sitting in with us or working on the Selma and Montgomery campaign or the Mississippi Summer Campaign of '64 or the March Against Fear in Mississippi or the Memphis Sanitation Strike of 1968. We cannot see where the present moment will take us, but this campaign happening in every state, small communities, large communities, urban areas where in Los Angeles especially sometimes there are 5 different points of marches with young people and old people, a predominance of young adults, middle-aged adults. This is now the 12th day. We do not know what the end might be, but I am impressed with the strategic planning that has taken place and with the reality that the first of many campaigns of nonviolence in the United States that we need to reshape our society might be clearly embedded in the present moment. I am impressed with the large numbers of white people who are saying, we have to break our silence. Racism is an issue for all Americans, not just for some. And that all Americans must break the silence and join the strategic struggle that can help to turn our country from the agency of what Martin King called the purveyor, the purveyor of violence in the world, to becoming a nation that might purvey justice. There is a reality to one of the major slogans that are being shouted. That slogan goes like this: no justice, no peace. It seems to me, in a very serious fashion, we who sense the need for change in the world must adopt the seriousness of that slogan. Peace, A.J. Mussey said, must come through peace. But I would say that a far more critical notion and idea is that we must break down the injustices of our time, all the injustices, in order that we can therefore really be able to see the visions for peace and the communities that can be reshaped for peace. No justice, no peace. And so I would propose that the end of endless violence must begin here in the United States with the shaping of nonviolent struggles, soulful struggles the science of how you transform the person and the community. And that dismantling every vestige of slavery, every vestige of the racism which became the solid theoretical structure of slavery, the dismantling of the economic disorder that makes structural racism or systemic racism such a horrible experience in the United States for people of color, and especially Black people. But that's the first order of business. And so the path to peace lies across the nitty-gritty community struggles to do the work in our own place that allows for the new communities to arise. I am convinced that we are on the cusp of what can be in the 21st century a series of those movements that will reshape our lives in every fashion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for reminding us of that. If you remember way back when ICUJP was founded, we struggled over the name. Interfaith was purposefully chosen. We wanted it, we knew it was people of various religions around the world. Communities were not individuals. We are communities. We are one humanity. United, that we wanted to be united together, all of us. And then just following your words, that justice had to come before peace. We had long discussions about that, if you recall. People wanted it to be peace and justice because that's what most people say. But way back then, we said, without justice, there is no peace.
Grace, I left out a major point.
Please continue.
Yeah, I need to bring that in.
Please.
I'll say it this way. Number one, that with the year 2020, a presidential election, we've experienced for 3 years the emergence of Trump 1. It has to be understood that Trump is the embodiment of the worst forces of torture of our 400-year history in the United States. And that the present election coming forward is very precarious. The Democratic Party may not have the stuff to lead us through this and beyond it. It may well be, in fact, that history will say that Trump will be reelected in order to cause a re-evaluation of the political parties for the creation of a political party that genuinely believes we hold these truths are self-evident, believes in justice and general welfare and the rest, and that then will cause a party to emerge that will really represent the well-being of all the human race, beginning with the 330 million people in the United States. I know that that is awful for me to say, but it may well be, because in fact, a simple non-election of Trump will not defeat Trumpism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He must be defeated by 10 or 15 million people, votes rather, to at least tell those forces that in the future, the American people are not prepared to vote for you in any shape or form. But more importantly, such a victory might say to the Democratic Party, stop being a centrist party of fiscal, Stop being a party of controlling of the earth, domination of the earth. Stop being the party that has 6,000 troops in Africa in 43 countries. Become the party equality, liberty, and justice for all, or else fail the task of the present moment. I'm sorry I excluded that, but I can.
Prophetic words and difficult to hear, but I'm afraid that you've given us something to really think about. And to thank you so much, Jim. It's scary to think of another 4 years with Trump, but you may be right.